Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamed in Highland Park, New Jersey, the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation, Anshe Emet. Joining me, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Schechter Day School of Long Island, parent of a recent graduate, Mazel Tov,
Th-
Princeton,
Thank
Avi.
you.
And Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanowski, Anshe Chesed, New York City. No graduations this year. No graduations, right?
No graduations this
All
year.
right. Friends, I want to just begin with a different way of talking about the hostage. I'm putting up this uh, note. You can find this on Sfira 710, which is SFIRA 710. It's the seventh of the 10th, which we would do 10-7, but in Israel it's 710. Sfira, SFIRA 710.com, and they have a Sfirat Omer. It's a kind of Sfirah. Today being 601 already in Israel. We're recording on, for us, it's still day 600, but, we've been saying all along these numbers are so unfathomable. Hayom sheshmot ve'achat yom, shehem shana achat, shiva chodashim, ve'esrim shalosh yamim b'choshechs. Today is 601 days. That is 1 year, 7 months, and 23 days of darkness. יהי רצון שישמרו אהובינו וינצלו מפני מבקשי רעתם ויחזרו במהרה לאור ביתם בשלום ובבריאות. Amen. May it be God's
Amen.
will that our loved ones be protected and saved from all that who desire evil upon them. May they be returned speedily to their homes in peace and health. Amen.
With
And
the
so,
light of the
we've been saying this from the beginning almost. We're in a kind of other Sephira today. Also, we're in Sfirat Omer. We're a few days away from Shavuot. We'll talk about that in a second. But reflecting on 600, 600 is not a normal number by which we count days. We tend to count obviously in weeks and months and years, but we have to make a note of this milestone, as difficult as it is, praying as always that they are spared from harm, that they be returned home and speedily. Amen. We are going to start with Bemidbar. We're starting a new book, the fourth book, the penultimate book of the Torah. And we want to spend some time also on Shavuot, which is coming up in just a few days. Sunday evening is our Shavuot. We experience that in many ways, including, but not limited to, the Tikkun Leil Shavuot, the evening of study, portion of that or not. Um, but first, Bamidbar. Bamidbar, uh, I want to say I'm glad we're into Bamidbar. Not that I did not like Vayikra, I love Vayikra, but you know, again, we're looking at different things, and one of the things I want to propose just about Bamidbar is that it's trying to take a snapshot, quite literally, of the people in terms of information, numbers, the numbers of the people. But I think there's a deeper story going on here, which is that according to the plan, the people are now done with all the preliminaries. They've left Egypt, they've received the Torah, they've built their Mishkan, they've dedicated their Mishkan, or they're about to dedicate their Mishkan. It's, depending on, how the calendar exactly works here. And they're soon going to go into the land. In order to go into the land, they have to make their way through the journey, and it's quite likely they anticipate that there'll be some kind of resistance or opposition to them. They need an offensive force and a defensive force, and they need to organize themselves that way. The people are presently organized in a very different structure. They're organized, or in their basic structure, shall we say. They're organized in the structure that we know of as families, clans, and tribes. And loosely translated, I'm going to say that a family, although mishpacha, the word mishpacha, we think of mishpacha as our nuclear family. The word mishpacha may, in fact, have a broader radius to a multi generational family. Bet Av is something larger. In fact, you may even say that Beit Av is synonymous with the tribe, and then Mateh is, the largest, is the tribe, and then there's goy or or Ada. So there are a lot of terms here, and what's fascinating here is that it's lemishpachotam levet avotam, toldotam lemishpachotam levet avotam. So my ear clicks into tam tam tam, toldotam lemishpachotam levet avotam, but the content of that is their genealogies. There's a history in their family according to the family, the larger clan structure within the tribe. And now we want to make tzivotam. We want to make them into armies. And so the easiest way for them to organize an army may be according to families. And this is where I think I get stuck, because I want to say that's not the most efficient way to organize an army. But I want to get your reaction to that reading, and to maybe, even discuss for a moment, what do you think is going on here at the beginning of Bemidbar? I think it's organization and mustering people into an army. Effective, not effective, that's debatable. Barry, go ahead.
So what's striking to me now, hearing it yet again, since we discussed it before we started recording, is that what seems to be going on here is this is the takeover of a central government. And a central government has basically two purposes. One is to raise taxes, and the other is to raise an army. And this is a testament, I think, to a reorganization of ancient Israelite society, because now there is going to be a central government, that this is marking the end of the tribal period, and the tribal structure is going to be reorganized so it can now serve the purposes of the central government.
Right, but we're still very much in the tribal structure here in the book of
I
Numbers.
don't think that's the case. I think sometimes we're misled by the narrative of the Torah, and we think that the Torah is actually describing what it's describing, as opposed to giving us insight into a society that is perhaps hundreds
No,
of years
but
after the events it describes.
okay, so there is an attempt here to project into the past a certain organization. I mean, in our thumbnail sketch of biblical history, it's not until the monarchy, really Saul, David, Solomon, that the tribes are united. I mean, David, the genius of David is that he's able to really put the tribes into one federation, and then Solomon builds on that, and a lot of the tribal boundaries, as we were, we had discussed this, they dissolve. The sense of a national ethos emerges only in the monarchy, and I would say only once there's a temple. I mean, it's at the time of Solomon, then you get the sense of, this is the people is one nation, or it quickly divides into Judea and the northern tribes. But here what we have is a snapshot of tribes. These are tribes with clans and families, and they're mustering themselves for the common defense. And that sounds logical, but
Right, but the only number that they give is for the tribe. They don't give a census of the smaller units, which you might expect that they would do. Like when we take our national census in the United States, we pay attention to the population of the states. It's going to dictate how many representatives each state will have in Congress, and some of the smaller numbers as well. But here in the Torah, all we get is the tribal allotment, and then the larger allotment where each camp of three tribes, we get those numbers as well.
right. Okay. So what I'm saying, what I'm suggesting is that this is I'm going to use the word primitive in the sense of, early. It's the unevolved snapshot of organization, because, to organize an army this way is not particularly effective. This is actually not a good way to organize an army.
Well,
Reasons
so
that
if we're going to read the Torah linearly, or the Tanakh linearly, then it actually is quite effective, because Joshua, in some ways, is a smashing success. It's not until you get to Judges that the crises multiply and perhaps we see the defects of the system.
Well, I only want to suggest that it's primitive in the sense of early, in that this is it seems like an organic way of defending your interest, your local, your group. Okay, you have a group of families and you'll band together to organize your family. But it just might be that you don't have, you may not have strong men in your family. You may have families that are filled with, you know others,
Us,
us, right?
people like us.
People like older people who are not necessarily going to fight, or I don't want to, get into a gender issue here, but
You don't
typically
have to.
those who would fight would not necessarily. I mean, of course, today women, participate and fight alongside men in certainly in Israel. There are plenty of mixed divisions and regiments that are very, very effective. So, well, let's understand we're talking about antiquity here, where women didn't fight. There are, of course, exceptions in the Bible, like uh, a certain woman who smote Sisera. Okay, she said to him, "Sisera, your steak is ready."
Actually, she was the author of the phrase "I got milk."
Right. Anyway, my point is that you you run the risk of wiping out an entire family, an entire tribe, if you go to war as a tribe, which would mean that it would be more effective to take the best of each tribe and put them in your front, or put them, make the army. So it's not really until the Davidic monarchy that you get a more effective army, where there are people mustered from different tribes who are the strongest, the best, the most able warriors from the different tribes. I mean, you're talking in the books of the prophets, certainly the early books, wars that are fought with thousands and thousands of casualties, and maybe they're mustered according to tribes, but each tribal chieftain, each tribal general, let's say, knows its best, the best, fighters of the tribe. And so they're able to make the best forces. What I'm saying is that what's so fascinating to me on this reading is that it seems that the story is about organization and also identity. And we can relate to that, because we have complex identities. Now, look, we just experienced, this horrendous murder last week. The two beautiful young people, Yaron Lashinsky, Sarah Milgram, okay? And look at the identity, all the hyphens that are part of these identities. So Yaron Lashinsky, German, Israeli, Jew, but also Christian, right? And young student, etc., worker at an embassy. And then Sarah Milgram, American, Kansan, young person, on a Jew, uh, community person, etc. All these different categories that you belong to that make up your identity. And if you just dial back a couple of centuries, identity was you belong to a family, you belong to a certain clan, you belong to a certain, larger unit. Maybe, if you identified, if you were part of, a different ethnic group, you had a tribe, right? Jews didn't think of themselves as tribes, you know, but I can imagine you went to certain towns in the mid, I don't know, 1600s, and you'd find, a lot of people related to people, you know, that that that
Sure.
people could share ancestry back to, great grandparents. Share.
I'm just observing that there's a few things that go on about this, about modern times and history. Like, in principle, our names still should reflect these things. That is to say, you have a first name, which is your individuality, and you have a last name, which is your Shem Mishpacha, we call it in Hebrew, your family name, your association with others. One makes you unique, and one of them makes you part of a group. And and yet, uh, it doesn't entirely work so well. I mean, there are certain things like if somebody is named. I'll just Krakauer. I know one thing about them. I know that they have an ancestor who came from Krakow. If somebody is named,
Pinsker.
Baghdadi or something like that, I know they have an ancestor from Baghdad. If somebody is, then there are the profession names. The Schneider was a tailor, and the Schuster
Malamat.
and
Malamet.
the
Malamed.
Malamet was a teacher, and that's kind of cool. But it is also true that our last names, um, for the most part, were kind of arbitrary when modern governments began to assign things. Um, like this is the color names like the Blau and Weiss and Schwartz. Those are just colors, and Hirsch is just a deer, and bear is just a bear. But those, especially the Sfaradim, who seem to have something more like clan names. Obviously, Cohen and Levy are kind of clan names. And, when people are named, Pinchasi or Menashe or something like that, those what I would imagine that they are something like clan names of some ancestor. You're from the Pinchas group, you're from the Menashe group, you're from the Reuveni group. And that's what we see in the Bible, right? Like towards the end of Numbers, let's see, I'm going to go to it now. There's another clan. Like, okay, I'm just gonna pull up. Here are the Bnei Binyamin lemishpechotam.
Yeah.
This is Numbers 26. I just picked a random tribe. But the Shevet of Binyamin, the tribe, is lemishpachotam in its subclans, lebela mishpachat habali. Bela was one of his sons, and the Bali clan, the Bali subclan. Ashbel mishpachat Ashbeli, and there's an Ashbeli subclan. Achiram mishpachat Achirami, and so it goes on. And the whole Shevet is clearly constituted by ethnic or familial subclans. And then we have the Beit Av, which we were talking about a little bit before the started recording. Is Beit Av smaller than Mishpacha? Is it the same as Mishpacha? I would have thought it was bigger, but I think I'm wrong. I think it's smaller. There's a few cases in the Tanakh where it is literally described as your father's house, like the widow daughter of a Kohen returns to her quote father's house, and then she can eat the sanctified food again. Um, is Beit Aviha, is that literally she goes to live in the house with her biological father, or is that returns to her sub
I
clan?
that's the big question because you have, go to Avram, Lech lecha me'aretzecha me'oladecha miBeit Avicha. So is that the narrow definition of Beit Avicha, your father's household, Terach, or is it a larger thing, which is, some the tribal zone of the Terahites, of all those people in the lineage there. And it's not clear to me, and I think, we could probably have it both ways. There's enough subtlety here to, because it's poetic. Look, for example, we call Beit Yaakov, right? And it's, Bnei Yisrael, Kol Tomar Liv Bnei Yisrael, Leveit Yaakov, B'taged Leveit Yisrael, or Beit Tov. You quote the
And
verses.
so, why this is like, so the three of us, just in principle, we like to discuss Bible stuff, and we'll be happy to have this conversation. What does it mean anything? And I would say that does it mean anything to our thousands of listeners? And I would say that it is a really interesting question about how it is, and here in 600 days, 601 days of the war, our Americanness, our Canadianness,
Absolutely.
our our international family of Am Yisraelness, our association with the national projects of the people of Israel concentrated in the state of Israel, those compound identities, how do they all hook on one to another? Um, I have an ancestral tradition that I'm a Kohen. I do certain things because of that. Do I feel closer to any other Kohanim? I certainly do not. It's kind of arbitrary. Um, do I feel closer to, people who are part of my various clans. I mean, I don't think that the subunit uh, of clans is a bad thing, but I don't really think it's that meaningful to people in the way that we live in the 21st century now. Maybe there were times when it was really, really meaningful. And you know that old like that Arabic proverb, if it is really an Arabic, me against my brother, me and my brother against my cousin, me and my brother and my cousin against the next guy, like this, just concentric circles of loyalty that I think probably did feel like, blood is thicker than water and gave people a place to feel that they really belonged.
Yeah, look, I think that that's part of, awareness of who you are. I mean, I can think of the Aboriginal or First Nations, in Canada and of course tribal structures in the United States. And you ask these questions, how would people who had these kinds of structures identify themselves? And to a certain extent, those identities are still in force.
I remember I
Well,
took a class in college. I took a class in college in the history of the city of Florence, and I needed it in some sort of requirement or whatever. But it was one of the best classes I ever took. It was so interesting, um, and I remember the professor made a very big deal. I don't remember where this is. Somewhere in Dante. Such and such person identifies himself and just says Mantova, like I'm from Mantua, and the identity of a city, a person in medieval or Renaissance Italy, um, would identify themselves from their membership or probably a fairly elite kind of person, as some sort of exalted citizenship in a given city. And I can think of some parallels. Um, our friend Joel Shaman's father, Jerry, the late Jerry Shaman, never was a person more proud of being from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Wilkes-Barre was his identity. And I think probably, um, I mean, my f favorite writer, Agnon Buchach, his hometown city was very meaningful to him in positive and negative ways. He loved Buchach. He wrote about Buchach, but he also satirized it. It's still a city in Ukraine today, but he also satirized it into Hebrew and changed the name from Buchach to Shibush, which means screw up.
yeah.
Um, and and the uh, I don't know if Ellie, you feel this way, Barry, if this comes across to you in school, the number of parents who tell me about their kids' B'nai Mitzvah that they want their kids to, quote, know who they are. And if I said to an American, we want to discover who you are, I would be almost certain that what people mean is their individuality. I want to discover who I am in contradistinction to other people. But when a parent says they want their kids to have B'nai Mitzvah so they know who they are, it's a group identity that they want them to
I
know
think that that's
what
exactly the
clan they're from.
point. It's a perfect point. It's a great point to really frame what's going on here at the beginning of Numbers, because what you're talking about is where do you get your identity? This is how three of us would relate to this, which is, you're numbered lemishpachotam leveit avotam. So you have already two layers of identity in who you are, and that's given to you, whereas that's something that we understand and not everyone else would understand. Let's pivot.
What I would
Okay,
add,
before you want to call. Yeah.
yeah, I remember thinking many years ago that the sweep of Western civilization was urbanization and alienation. That the process of people moving into cities created a great disjunction with the land. And most of us are no longer connected to the land. And what's striking about our conversation is that we see that these identity issues, which we're tracing all the way back to Sefer Bemidbar, the book of Numbers, come from the very beginning of the urbanization process, because most people in the Bible were farmers. They were land-based and they had an attachment to a specific place. Most people in cities don't quite have that same attachment to the land. And so it raises the same identity issues, but the solutions are going to be very different. We're not going to find families as tightly knit in cities as they are in farming communities.
Interesting. All right, let's take some time. We're going to go a little over here. We're going to talk about Shavuot coming up in a couple of days. Shavuot associated with so many things. Of course, in the agricultural cycle of the land of Israel, that's where the 7 weeks and the final harvest, the first of the harvest, Bikurim. But Shavuot for us has evolved to the holiday, of course, Zman Matan Toratenu. That's already identified by the rabbis, the time of the giving of the Torah, and we typically commemorate Shavuot through a number of ways. One of which is the Tikkun Leil Shavuot, the all-night Torah study or partial evening of Torah study, um, and just offer a few words here in terms of uh, how to enhance Shavuot, what to do on Shavuot. Shavuot is the kind of also ran of the Jewish holidays. Doesn't get, someone called it the Rodney Dangerfield of Jewish holidays,
I
right?
don't get no respect, let
I
me tell
got no
you.
respect, right? On the Dan Senor podcast, Rachel Gober-Poland was on it. She called it the Sabrina of Jewish holidays, like harking back to Charlie's Angels. I didn't really get the reference because I never watched Charlie's Angels, but the point is, it just doesn't rate as much, and the truth is, it ought to. It celebrates a key facet of our lives, and as rabbinic Jews, of course, the central. We've co-opted Shavuot. We've made it a rabbi's holiday. We've made it a holiday of
So,
rabbis in Torah and teaching and study. Barry,
so the question that is raised, is it a second tier holiday because it celebrates the Torah? Or are there other features that make it contribute to it being second tier, and the Torah is kind of a victim here as well?
I
But
think
I
Well,
both.
think
well, yeah. Go
what
ahead.
what I would say is that the what we could do with Shavuot is it is an opportunity for each of us to figure out what our relationship is to the Torah and how we identify ourselves in connection to the Torah. And that, frankly, is a gift from God to be able
Uh,
to do that.
that's great. I every year I say the same thing, and every year I'm forced to confront my own failures on this. Shavuot as a 2 day holiday, it maybe is a little bit difficult. I mean, all of the Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galuyot, all the second days of the holidays in the diaspora, the 2 days of the beginning of Pesach and at the end, and the 2 days of the beginning of Sukkot, and then the Shmini Atzeret plus Simchat Torah, and the 2 days here of Shavuot. Um, it's a little hard to get psyched up for Shavuot on the second day because the first day, Matan Torah, is so dramatic. Like, what do you say the second day? Every year I say, let's devote the first day to Torah Shebichtav, the written Bible, and let's devote the second day to Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral Torah. I like to imagine that, you know, put a little pixie dust on Jewish mythology here and say that the first day celebrates the Torah that God gave us, and the second day celebrates the Torah that we give God. But I never get around to organizing it because it's
The
it's a
end of the year. That's
it's a
why
slog from
the tank
Passover to
is so empty for
Shavuot.
all of
You know,
us.
I have to say that even the rabbis had their moments of questioning because the Haftarah for the second day is from Habakkuk, who most people have never even heard of.
Oh, but it's great that the Haftarah in from Habakkuk is becomes very central in the most dramatic passage in the Zohar of Shimon ben Yochai's revelation to his students. So I have a special love for that Haftarah.
So
Right,
I
but
want
that's
to, I
as
want,
an educated person. For Amcha,
Yeah, it's
which
not so
is the
good.
code word for Amaratzo,
I
is
want to, yeah, go ahead.
it's hard to connect.
I want to pick up on an idea which is like the what place Torah has for us. I mean, this is not Simchat Torah in the sense because Simchat Torah, I argue all the time, is not about the Torah at all as much as it is about peoplehood. But Shavuot really is about Torah, and we all have a particular point of access or point of entry. I want to suggest two things. One is chidush, another is simcha. That chidush, what I mean is coming up with new interpretation or trying to find something new in the Torah, and then as a byproduct of that, I think experiencing joy. I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example. I was asked to write this little article for the Jewish Journal. So, they asked me to respond on a verse from Bemidbar, and I taught. It said, the verse about each tribe with its flag. So I didn't talk about the verse. I talked about stamp collecting, and how there's an old Israeli set of stamps based on the tribal flags. And I got so much joy out of that. And that the verse, the stamp itself, which is, maybe the size of half an inch, square inch, is a portal to Torah study, and that you can get joy out of that. And there I've accomplished both a novel way of interpreting Torah, which is not so new, but also something that no one ever thought of, or maybe few people thought of. And I have tremendous joy out of that. And I think what the three of us do, each in our own way, is we try to experience the Torah differently, possibly anew, with different sets of eyes, and to share that with people around us in our communities, and also, I think, to experience the joy of that. I think that this, for me, Shavuot has become this opportunity to experience and to share that. And what's unfortunate is that that's it's very rarefied, in the sense that there's only a few self-selected people that really join that club on a year-to-year basis. We hope that the circle expands, that people really get a sense of excitement about it, because it is really exciting. It's joyful to learn something new. So something new and something joyful. I want to.
What I would add is that another message of Shavuot is that the study of Torah is really accessible to everyone. Sometimes we can become intimidated. The Torah is the Torah, however, whatever that may mean to us. But Shavuot really tries to get across that we each have our entryway into the Torah, and all we have to do to find it is to open the book.
Right.
Well, and in a wonderful piece of rabbinic creative wordplay, uh, towards the end of the Torah, Moshe's given the people a pep talk and says, Ki lo davar reku mikem, it is not a vain thing from you. This teaching is substantial, it's serious, it's deep. It's not rek, it is not empty. Lo davar reku mikem, it is not empty from you. And the rabbis say, V'im davar reku mikem. And if it seems vacuous and meaningless, it's because of you. That is to say, your own failure to read creatively, your own failure to look and search and uncover its depths. That's the responsibility of any Torah student.
So I think the three of us will all gravitate to different parts of the Torah, different themes or different kinds of genres within the Torah. You've heard me say this. I tend to gravitate more to story elements of the Torah, to try and find the story. Even in Bamidbar, I try to find, like, what's the story going on here? That's a driving question. At this point in my life, it's certainly been driving a question for me, trying to find story within these things, and the story behind the story. Um, what's the story in the details? What's it trying to say? And then, of course, having that relate back to my life, to our lives, to the community, etc., and to try and share that with people. I'm just wondering, if you could share with us, the point of entry for you. When you are studying, just, I mean, what kinds of questions are you asking of the Torah? What does it elicit from you? And it could just be anything at any time, of course, but what what's your angle? Who would like to start?
Well, my angle is obtuse. So
That was the best answer.
so as I get older, I'm more interested in larger sections that, I've been teaching high school for 27 years now, and it's always bothered me that we really don't teach often books of the Bible. We teach parts of them, but the books are actually books. They have a message to them, And I like to think about what the larger text has to say. And you know, we on the show, of course, we follow the weekly reading, which is very important, but it's not the same as the global reading. And I just want to add one thing that I'm often asked what my favorite holiday is, and I almost always answer Yom Kippur. But the truth of the matter is, I like each holiday when it's coming up. And it's the same with the Torah. So
Yeah,
what gives Parshat HaShavua such power for me is that that's where we are for this week. And so we see what we could find in it. At the
nice.
same time, when I'm left to my own devices, I try, as I said, to read more globally than Parshat HaShavua.
How about Kalinowski?
I I do prefer the oral Torah to the written Torah. I feel like in one major way, the rabbis who lived, we can say for convenience sake, roughly the year, we would number 0 to 500, something like that, a little bit longer or whatever. Obviously come from a very, very different world than I live in, but in one major way, we're similar, which is that we've both inherited a text from a totally other world. It's a sacred text, and we got to figure out what it means. And so I really like reading along with the rabbis. I find not that I don't love the Bible, of course I do, but you give me a choice, I'd rather study the words of Chazal, and that's the process of making meaning from this text that can be very hard to understand, which is really in a very different world than I live in.
You know what's so fascinating is that, we've had these conversations. I looked at some pictures the other day, going back, 12 years ago, more than that. The three of us at camp, from 2000, my last summer there was 2017, but I have pictures from 2000, I think 10, 2011. And we've been having the conversation, and I never get tired of the conversation. There's always something new that I learned from both of you, and that because we all evolve over this time. It's our life time conversation, um, and it you know we get we get to know each other, of course, through that, and these different families. Chazal is important to all of us, of course, and the Torah is important to all of us, and story is important to all of us, and the globe. But we all have our little places and our little sets of questions that animate us and get us the newness and the joy that we're all seeking. Um, and Barry, as you are standing here, uh, wishing people how would, in addition to cheesecake, blintzes, sour cream, lasagna.
I would say, Torah is meant to be shared. And so we have the Tikkun Leil Shavuot because Torah is for the community, not just for the individual.
Indeed.
And it's important to teach our own Torah and to be confident enough that our thoughts, whatever they may be about the Torah, are not only worth having, but we're sharing as well.
Toratzi Valano Morasha Kilat Yaakov belongs to all of us. We all have our portion in it. Rabbi Kalmanovsky, give you last word here, giving us a wish for the Shavuot, a blessing, some made in addition to bon appetit, cheesecake, blintzes. I wish everybody a beautiful, beautiful Shavuot, joining us in experiencing something new. Give yourself an opportunity. Everyone who's with us, of course, you're all big fans and you study with us, so you're already there. But you know what you could do? You could share this YouTube with people and boost our numbers from 100 to 100 and whatever, okay? We've gone a lot, and people have responded to me personally over the years, and over the last few
People
weeks,
should know that
actually.
we get paid by the view.
We
So
got we earn YouTube a lot of money advertising here, but we appreciate everybody's attention and the devotion to us and to the conversations, and of course the Torah, remembering on the 601st day the hostages, the war, praying that it can end soon and that all the soldiers can go home, everybody can go home, and there can be no more fear for anyone. Wishing our families, our communities, our friends, all loved ones a joy-filled and meaningful Shavuot, and that we hope to see you next time on our Parsha Talk. Chag Sameach,
Shalom v'chag sameach.
Chag Sameach.